Ever since Valve reopened the Steam Workshop for Counter-Strike 2, many mappers have been revising and releasing ports of their global offensive maps, including those from past operations like Vandal, Biome, and Mutiny, as well as others that have never been accepted into the game or are brand new with the engine. Regardless, many of these maps take full advantage of CS2's new tools, and with all of the time that I've spent admiring them, I can't help but look back and notice how outdated CS1 has become. It makes me all the more impressed and appreciative of what these mappers have been putting out, and given how new CS2 is to Counter-Strike and how little I know about it, I had to reach out to one of them to learn more about what actually goes into making a CS2 map, which brings us to Pool Day. This map was first made by Squall all the way back in 2001 for the original Counter-Strike and quickly grew in popularity, leading
leplubodeslapin,
who I'll refer to as Leplu, and a few others to remaster this map for Global Offensive, which was an instant success on the Steam Workshop. In fact, its popularity nearly brought it into the game officially through Operation Payback. If you'd like to know more about the history and why this map didn't make it into the game, I have a video by Escalation linked in the description where he talks about it at a greater length. What I want to talk about is how Leplu took this map and remastered it for CS2, because even though it's small, there's a lot that went into making it. To begin, let's talk about the models, starting with this water fountain. It's the same one found on Overpass, but with a catch. The one here reads
Trinkwasser,
meaning drinking water, whereas this one is empty. Surely Leplu had to decompile the model or create a new texture for it, but no. You see, in CS2's Hammer, you can take any model and convert it into a mesh, which allows you to manipulate it from within Hammer without needing to decompile and tinker around with it in a modeling program. So that's exactly what he did, and now he could go about erasing the German text. At first, this might seem as simple as deleting that part of the fountain. And sure, this would have technically worked, but when you convert a model into a mesh, it can sometimes screw up the shading, and in this case, you can clearly see the difference in the fountain before and after converting it. To remedy this, Leplu made a copy before converting it and deleted everything but the top plate. Then he used the fast texturing tool to shift the texture somewhere else, which is as simple as dragging this box to a flat part of the texture. Now all that was left to do was scale it up a bit to prevent Z fighting with the original model, and just like that, we have virtually the same water fountain minus the text. Leplu also made use of the fast texturing tool in other parts of the map like the Pool Day poster. Here, the paper, writing, and tape are all part of this one texture. If I select the paper and then go to the fast texturing tool, you can see that the bounds are within the top portion. If I select the tape, they're at the bottom. There are several more examples throughout the map of where Leplu did this, but I'll leave those spots for you to explore. Now I want to look at some of the other models, starting with this pool ladder and overflow grate, except they're not actually models. If I select the ladder and go into face mode, you can see all of the quads that make up this mesh. Although it may look complicated at first, an object like this is actually very easy to make in CS2 thanks to the bridge and pivot tools, which allow you to connect and extrude curved edge loops while controlling some of the parameters like the number of steps and snap angle. Looking at the grate, it appears as though there's some beveling going on around the edges, but if we go into face mode, you can see that these are just perpendicular sets of faces that reflect light in such a way that makes it look like it's curved. We can confirm this by changing our 3D viewport to see the normal maps, which shows us gradients around these edge loops. How did Leplu do this? Well, if we select this edge loop, we can set the normals to hard, soft, or default. Setting them to hard results in a sudden change between them, whereas setting them to soft results in a gradual one. This type of normal mapping is a powerful and computationally cheap way to simulate high poly meshes, which is important in a game engine where you want maximum performance. Unlike the ladder, which is just a mesh made in Hammer, the diving board is a mesh made in Hammer turned into a prop. Why is this? Well, if you jump off the diving board in-game, it wiggles a bit, and to make it wiggle, Leplu had to create an animation for it in another program. But how did he do it if it was built in Hammer? One fascinating thing about this engine is that you can select a set of meshes and export them as a DMX, OBJ, or FBX file, which can all be imported into 3D modeling software. In this case, Leplu used Blender to add the animation, which we can easily track frame by frame in the model dock. So that's how it wiggles, but how does it make you jump high? Well, there's a tiny trigger at the front of the diving board called trigger gravity that lowers your gravity to 0.5, and surrounding it are several others that change it back to 1. So when you jump, your gravity lowers, and as soon as you touch one of the surrounding triggers, it goes back to normal. Now, this isn't the only case where leplu turned a hammer mesh into a model. All of the slides in the indoor water park are also models that he made in Hammer. In fact, he pieced them together from this modular kit he made that includes the base meshes with their models. Again, these models are easy to make. All you have to do is right-click the mesh and select Create Model from Selection, which allows you to easily tint the object with whatever color you want. This works beautifully with these slides because they use this metal pipe texture from Nuke that is actually designed to be tinted. And it just so happens that this texture, despite being made for metal pipes, works perfectly for slides. You can tint regular meshes as well, but in some cases, it's more convenient to work with them as models. These pool dividers are an example of where tinting regular meshes works fine because they're all the same shape. The last model, or sets of models that I'd like to talk about, are the pool floaties, which are also brand new with this version of the map. What makes them special are their properties. They can be kicked around, float in the water, and even pop when dealt damage, emitting these funny sounds and sinking to the bottom. leplu modeled them in Blender, creating both an inflated and deflated version of each. Back in Hammer, he configured them to be breakable physics props that turn into the deflated version when damaged. To make them float, he increased the buoyancy to 10, and for the popping sound, he added this output that fires a specified sound when broken. He shared a lot more information about these with me, including baking the texture maps, creating the rigs, and testing them out in the model doc. But instead of me talking about it, I highly recommend watching his video where he explains how you can create your own. So check it out through the link in the description. Alright, so that covers all of the model related stuff I want to talk about. Let's now look at the textures a little closer, starting with these tiles. If I right click on one of them and hover over Assets under Mouse, I can open the tile texture in the material editor to better understand what's going on. As you can see, there's a color, mask, normal, roughness, and height map that form this material. It's also tinted pink, which we can change to whatever else we want. Starting with the color map, which can also be referred to as the diffuser albedo map depending on who you ask, this forms the base texture with no special effects. The tint mask controls which parts of the texture are tinted by the color tint variable, with the darker parts of the map corresponding with areas that shouldn't be tinted. In this case, those are the seams between the tiles. The normal map, which I mentioned earlier with the overflow grate, controls how light is reflected off the texture to simulate curvature. Since the tiles are flat and smooth, we only see a little bit of deviation around the seams, marking the edges of the tiles that curve into the mortar. The roughness map controls how sharp the reflections are. Darker parts are more mirror-like, while lighter parts appear rougher. This example is interesting because there are a bunch of splotches everywhere that make the material appear wet and greasy. Lastly, we have the height map, which in this case doesn't actually do anything because CS2's branch of Source 2 doesn't offer parallax mapping, which is a real shame because it would have allowed the tiles to have this lippage effect. So that's how the tile textures work. One more texture I want to go over is the roof, because when leplu told me that he made it from a mesh, I was confused by how he was able to do so in a way that perfectly matched its corresponding material. But by changing the 3D viewport to see the normals, he was able to build it to closely match the material, which he wanted me to mention was made by
Etienne Bednars,
whose ArtStation profile you can find in the description. I think it's now time to look at the water. Each body is made from a block converted into a Funk water entity, with the top face being this custom water texture. On its own, swimming underwater doesn't affect your vision, which is why there's this post-processing volume entity at the bottom. When you touch it, a post-processing filter is applied. In this case, it's set to underwater. Otherwise, you'd have crystal clear vision, which wouldn't make any sense. In its current state, water in CS2 has this weird bug where if you touch the bottom of a deep pool, you can't swim back to the surface. Fortunately, on pool day, you can use either of these two ladders to climb back up, which again are just a couple of meshes, but with this extra bit textured with an invisible ladder material. You can also pick up some HE grenades while you're down there, which is a throwback to the original version of the map. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the water is its reflections. Unlike Source 1, which uses static cube maps, Source 2's are parallax corrected, meaning they update in real time depending on your position and angle. I can actually enable cube map view in the console to see exactly what each surface is reflecting. It's still a cube, so it's not perfect, but it's a huge improvement over Source 1. In Hammer, this is what they look like, and you can control each cube map's boundary, which is useful when working in enclosed spaces like this. The last thing I want to go over is this map's Easter egg. If you walk over to this locker by the jacuzzi, you'll notice that it's missing a lock, and if you press the use key, it opens, revealing this lever. Flick it and you're transported to the 1.6 version, where everything is simple and blocky. To accomplish this, Leplu placed it way above the CS2 version and added this info landmark entity at the center of both. When you flick the lever, you're actually opening this invisible funk door, which is configured to trigger this relay when it opens or closes, which fades your screen to white and uses this trigger teleport entity to teleport you and everyone else to the other info landmark entity. The teleportation is relative, so your position, momentum, and view angle are all preserved. In fact, this is also how these grenade vents work. Their landmark entities are just configured to flip the orientation of the grenades so that they teleport facing the opposite direction. This 1.6 version is a nice memento to the original creator of the map Squall, and should provide some nostalgia to the old-timers who used to play this map back in the day. So there you have it, CS2's Pool Day in all its glory. I'd like to thank Leplu for allowing me to make this video and sharing his knowledge with me about Source 2. Pool Day is like me dipping my toes in the water with Source 2, and the temperature is perfect. I can't wait to sink the rest of my body in, explore some of the other maps, and meet more amazing people. Thank you for watching. This is LED, switching off.